Good evening and welcome to Organic News on awakeradio.co.uk. Tonight we're going to have at 6:30 Debra Sweet of an organization called worldcan'twait.net. We actually attempted, we missed last Tuesday. I took the bus down to DC last Tuesday for the Lynn Stewart action that they were having in front of the White House. Stayed down there for 2 nights to videotape and to interview people for the Close Guantanamo action that they had the following day, last Wednesday, where and we were attempting to do it live from Washington, D.C. last week and just ran into some technical difficulties. So I would like to play just a little bit of the recordings that I took from down there in just a few minutes. But the first thing that I wanted to begin with was to read a quote by Mark Twain that I saw and read in this video called The Free Man and the Straw Man Explained on YouTube, which was a really interesting video on maritime law and how maritime law has extended to the people, how the country has basically just signed all of us off, like to be collectors of their debt through things like birth certificates, social security numbers, etc. And the quote from Mark Twain reads, "In religion and politics, people's beliefs and convictions are in almost every case gotten at secondhand, without examination from authorities who have not themselves examined the questions at issue, but have taken them at secondhand by other non-examiners whose opinions about them are not worth a brass farthing." And I thought that was a really good quote because my belief, the root of 99.9, if not 100% of our problems stems from the fact that we are just completely disconnected from the way that nature works. And we have just manipulated nature to our own ends. The bottom line is we are the ones misaligned from nature. And then instead of recognizing that and attempting to bring ourselves back to health and alignment, we're condemning nature for giving us the feedback that we're out of alignment. And, so that's sort of like getting angry and trying to arrest, cancer, if you get it. I mean, you can't arrest cancer. You can't arrest a sunburn. These things, they're telling you, they're trying to, guide and direct you. I mean, it would be completely like, right. Somebody would be seen as pretty out there or, needs to go to, see someone if they started trying to arrest nature for having hurricanes. So in so many forms, we have truly, swayed so off course. And instead of recognizing that and moving back on course, and I completely agree that it's not easy. I completely agree that even a lot of times I start to wonder if it's not too late, if the momentum of our disconnect from nature isn't just so far gone that the only thing that can possibly even rectify it is just nature itself completely breaking down. Of course, you know, the system completely breaking down and just rebuilding itself from the bottom up. Because whether we do it with nature or not, you know, nature is going to do it. Sooner or later, health-wise, people are going to get sick, you know, mentally, physically. You know, nature is going to, you know, be in charge. And that is simply the way that it is. So I have, since we were not able to do the interviews and do live streaming last week when I was down in DC, I have some videos from, I'm going to play from that action. Let me, pardon me, I'm just, okay, here's Close Guantanamo. This is from a lawyer, Christine Husky, who is involved in trying to release the detainees who have been cleared from release for years and still have not done so. So here's that video.
I'd like to introduce Christine Husky, who's an adjunct professor at Georgetown University Ball Center. Hi, thanks for coming today. It's really hot, isn't it? But your pain is just for today, and some pain for longer than that. But your pain is just for today. Imagine the pain of the men at Guantanamo for over 10 years. I started representing detainees in March of 2002. That was over 11 years ago. That was when people didn't even know anything about Guantanamo. And what we did know, we were told it was the worst of the worst, and terrorists and people who were captured on the battlefield. But today, 11 years later, we know differently, don't we? We know that 95% of the men at Guantanamo were never accused or never found to have actually committed any hostilities against the United States. 86 men have been cleared for transfer or release. Why are they still there? 100 men, as you know, are on hunger strike. 40 are being force-fed. Senator Feinstein went recently because she was concerned about the hunger strikers. And afterwards, she wrote a letter to Defense Secretary Hagel saying, I'm concerned because the force-feeding policies are out of step with international norms, medical ethics, and the practices of the U.S. Bureau on Prisons. Out of step. What she really meant was that those policies violate Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions, which prohibit humiliating and degrading treatment, and those policies violate the United Nations Convention Against Torture. That's because force-feeding, what is happening to 40 men at Guantanamo, means being strapped into a 6-point restraint chair, having tubes shoved down your nose against your will. The tubes go into your stomach, and you get Ensure pumped into you 6 times or twice a day. That is a form of torture. That is torture. Why are the men at Guantanamo doing this? Why are they doing this? Because they are protesting their indefinite detention. Indefinite detention is another form of torture. My previous organization that I worked for, Physicians for Human Rights, came out with a report in 2011 finding that medical evidence shows the physical and psychological trauma of indefinite detention. Medical evidence shows that the uncertainty of not knowing when you'll ever be released, if ever, if you'll ever have a trial, or if you'll ever see your family again, shows that causes severe damage to your immune and your cardiovascular systems and a whole host of other problems, physical and psychological. And in many cases, indefinite detention rises to the level of torture. All right? That sounds very clinical and textbook, I know. So let me tell you about some of the men that I have represented. All right, Fauzi al-Oda. He was brought to Guantanamo in January of 2002. He's a Kuwait citizen. His father is an Air Force colonel with the Kuwait military who fought alongside the U.S. in the First Gulf War. There have been no charges against Fauzi. Obaidullah. That's my former client, Obaidullah. He was picked up when he was 19. He's been there for over a decade. Can you imagine spending a decade of your life away from your family? He had charges against him, but those charges were dismissed, meaning there is no evidence of any crimes that he's committed. Why is he still at Guantanamo? Obaidullah is on hunger strike, and he has been for, as we hear, 141 days. Obaidullah wrote this poem. I'm going to read you an excerpt. It's called Life is for Love. The moon had thousands of complaints. She had wept heartfully. Her tears were shed on the flowers. She was saying that life is for love. There are left but a few days of life. Then why do you hate and oppress and always fight each other? You are wise and privileged. You are the best of all the creatures. Then make prosperous this world by the power of your wisdom. Choose for yourselves and others the laws of humanity. Indeed, where is our humanity? Thank you.
Okay, so that was her name, again, Christine Husky. She was a lawyer, or is a lawyer, helping to release some of the detainees at Guantanamo. And so our guest that's coming up at 6:30, Debra Sweet, and her organization World Can't Wait is part of trying to bring awareness to the action of closing Guantanamo and bringing to light, more of the facts, because people don't know, they're not aware of what's going on. Maybe people believe that, who they're holding at Guantanamo are terrorists, that word that they've been throwing around so much lately. But to really get to the truth, is something that I try to advocate and be an advocate for, which is to slow down. We really need to slow down, pay attention, look closer, instead of just dismissing people as terrorists, just because they're from a certain part of the world or they fit a certain profile, like we, can tend to just, do our own racial profiling, and which brings me back to the Mark Twain quote that I read about, so much of what we do is that we rely on some authorities, like the good housekeeping seal of approval. So if it went through whoever we deem to be in the power position, they must know. So if they're saying it, then it must be okay and it must be right, without filtering it through our own system, without going and putting things through our own natural system. It's all about skipping nature's process. That Mark Twain quote that I read, it really struck me, because it's all about skipping nature's process. So we don't bother putting things to the test ourselves. We don't bother tasting something ourselves. We just take someone else's word for something who didn't bother putting, tasting it themselves, putting it through and giving it due process. So we now have arrived at this point in society where, right, we just completely skip over nature's process, no due process. We convict, torture, and assassinate people just like that, without any taking the time to to really see if it's warranted, just because someone else who doesn't even bother, like Congress, who doesn't even have time to read half the bills that go by their desk. Everything is rushing. They pass so many bills without ever even getting to look at it all. I mean, it's all about being disconnected from the natural process of going slow. So I just wanted to, I'm just going to play a short piece. This video is actually about 10 minutes long. This is Debra Sweet speaking at the Close Guantanamo action down in DC last Wednesday, which I apologize, we couldn't do it live from there. So I won't play the whole thing, I'll just play a few minutes of it.
Sing it so Mr. Obama can hear us.
Okay, sorry, I'm just, that was a bit of a chant. One of the speakers that were there was, he was, taking the protesters through a song. Okay, now this is a bit of Debra Sweet in front of the White House for Close Guantanamo.
We're also working on, and that is ending solitary confinement. Sisters and brothers, we have international solidarity. We have love for the Guantanamo hunger strikers, for the victims of the drone bombings, and we also recognize the need to oppose mass incarceration by our own government. Here and abroad, every night, it is estimated 80,000 prisoners in the gulag of the world, the United States of America, where more people are incarcerated per capita than any country ever, 2.5 million, are in solitary confinement. This is torture. And on July 8th, the California prisoners at Pelican Bay start their own hunger strike against solitary confinement and torture in U.S. prisons. Please support them. Please learn more about it. WorldCan'tWait.net, StopMassIncarceration.org. Thank you.
Okay, so that was Debra Sweet in front of the White House at the Close Guantanamo action. And
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay.
She's actually ready to join the call when you are, so give me the word and I'll bring her in.
So here we are in front of the White House, and we're going to talk to Debra Sweet. You are the director of World Can't Wait, and that is a national organization specifically geared towards this cause of closing Guantanamo.
That's one of the things we've paid a lot of attention to for the last 8 years, but our mission is stop the crimes of our government. And so we put a lot of effort into opposing the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan, torture, Guantanamo, Bagram, Abu Ghraib, and the surveillance that's become ubiquitous, as we've been learning about more since Edward Snowden leaked the vast NSA spying against whole populations.
So World Can't Wait is 8 years old?
Yes, we started in 2005. The world can't wait to drive out the Bush regime, which we were obviously not successful in doing. Bush was replaced in a vote where people thought they were getting a person who was very different than George Bush. And they did on the surface get someone who's very different. And yet all the things that really concerned us during the Bush years have mostly been expanded.
People were saying earlier when I was recording, that Obama has the power to release these prisoners from Guantanamo. Do you believe that that's true, that he and he alone has the power, or do you think?
Well, it could happen different ways, but he unquestionably has the executive authority, which is kind in other ways. Look, he's saying he has the executive authority to use drone attacks all over the world, regardless of national boundaries, and that nobody can challenge that. Congress doesn't have the right to tell him not to do that if they were even trying, which they're not. But yes, he could do it under executive authority, and he actually has the explicit legal authority to get a national security exception to the NDAA and release the prisoners.
Does he answer to anyone, do you think, Obama?
He answers to the ruling class forces in this country, yes. He has a lot of constraints on it. Well, there's capitalist imperialist system, and it's a class that dominates that, and doesn't just have to do with their income. They have a vast system of production that now spans the whole world, and they have to protect that with their vast military. And part of what Guantanamo is about is not those 166 prisoners left. It's a system of control, the same way surveillance is, to keep people in fear of the power.
It seems maybe that's one of the reasons why they don't let the prisoners out, is because, it would almost be like they were admitting to something that, they don't want to admit to, or they don't want to admit they were wrong, or that they think that they're admitting they did something wrong, or heaven forbid, like, let the people win a little bit. And so they don't want to let go of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's certainly part of it. It's an intimidation factor. And it doesn't have anything to do with justice. This country was not built on justice in the first place, even before the Constitution. It was built on the theft of a continent, genocide, and slavery.
And the fact that these men in this Guantanamo, they're not even prisoners. I mean, they
call them detainees,
right.
And they don't have the rights that would be given to people in most so-called civilized countries. That's the right of habeas corpus, to know the charges against you, to be able to defend yourself against those charges, and to have a route out. They have none of those.
That should scare, like, everyone, anyone in this country. I mean, just because the majority of them are not Americans shouldn't, make it okay to detain them indefinitely without any due process. I mean, that should really terrify anyone, because now with the NDAA, guess what, folks? That includes you. Like, that includes.
Well, how does this government get over it? Since, and people have been hearing this for 12 years now, that this is all done to keep us safe, people that live in this country. And that it's those other people in those other countries, which happen to be all countries where people are Arabs or South Asian or Muslim, or in some cases all three, and that is the danger. So if you lock them up, excuse me, the whole climate
Hello.
going.
Hello?
Hi.
So we have Debra.
Debra.
Debra?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have you on the line. That's great.
Yeah, sorry for that. That was a little bit of a technological mystery.
Well, my belief is, we're trying to go back to, being more organic and get behind the scenes of, the pretty image that we try to portray. And this is what it looks like. People need to get used to things not being in pretty packages and all, so technical difficulties is all part of having real alternative news. So, it doesn't bother me if it doesn't bother the audience. So, while we were trying to get you on the line, I just was playing 5 minutes of the interview from last Wednesday in front of the White House. So.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Yeah, because we were supposed to do it live from there, but, again, with the technical difficulty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, since then, what's been going on with, has anything happened with the closed Guantanamo since then?
Yes, actually something very important.
Wow.
Four of the prisoners who are on hunger strike went into federal court Sunday night. I mean, their lawyers did. They're still in Guantanamo being force-fed. And they're suing the Obama administration to get the military to stop force-feeding them. This is 4 prisoners, one of whom is Shakur Amir, who is the only remaining British resident who's left in Guantanamo. Is it leader of the prisoners?
Okay. Technically, they're really detainees instead of prisoners, though. Would that be safe to say?
Well, They prefer to call themselves prisoners, and I prefer to use that.
Okay.
Detainees somehow sounds, yes, they are being indefinitely detained, but somehow it sounds like not so bad. Oh, they're just being detained, and they'll be out in a minute. No, they're in prison, and
Right.
there's no way out. So I usually use the term prisoners.
Well, like that's sort of, the point that I was trying to make by bringing that up, about like what you call things, because, I mean, technically they're supposed to be detainees, which means that they're like, I think by wanting to bring up the term detainee, I'm trying to show that exactly they're not supposed to be in there, but in fact they really have been turned into prisoners, but for what reason they don't even know they don't even know why they're being held. There's no charges against them.
And this is true for most of them. You're absolutely right.
So,
Without charges, you can't defend yourself, and there's no way to get out. That's the nature of indefinite detention, without charges, and that is the biggest problem with Guantanamo. Yes, there's the torture and the fact that men have been held there for more than 11 years, but as long as Guantanamo is there and the Obama administration refuses to close it, they're holding 56 men that they just recently had to give their names, but there's no charges against them, and the U.S. has no plans to ever put them on trial. Why? Mainly because they were tortured.
oh yeah. So it's before having you on, I played the girl Christine Husky, who was one of the, she also spoke last Wednesday, one of the lawyers, and she held up a picture of, one of the prisoners that was captured when he was 19 years old, which was 10 years ago. And so why do they pick these people up? For what reason do they pick them up and put them in Guantanamo?
Well, most of them came in 2001 and 2002. A few arrived as late as 2004 or 5. But you have to go back to 9/11
Right.
and remember, at least in New York, people, Muslims, South Asian, were being swept up off the streets of Brooklyn, New Jersey, all over the area. Hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of people were put into detention because there was a wholesale creation of an atmosphere where anybody that was an Arab or a Muslim or looked that way even, or had a name that somebody thought was in the government, was being picked up. And this happened all over the Middle East.
I mean, talk about
on the basis of real information or on the basis of no information. People were turned in because the U.S. was handing out bounties of $5,000 in Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's literally why a lot of those guys ended up in Guantanamo.
So
more than 90% of them have been released.
So okay, like bounty, you said. So does that mean that the government is paying money to someone to be fingering these people?
Yeah, they gave out $5,000 U.S. cash to people who would turn someone in and say, oh, they're working with Al-Qaeda or the Taliban.
So that's
and in a lot of cases, that was the so-called security services of Pakistan that was turning people in for the bounty.
Well, gee, if, right, it's when you wave $5,000 in front of desperate people, I mean, sure, finding something wrong in someone or turning someone into a criminal for money, because someone is paying you. So that, like, right, that's really showing how the capitalist system that it's not even capitalism, it's capitalism, gone completely insane, So, right, in order to keep it going, you have to perpetuate criminality, you have to perpetuate terrorism, you have to keep creating criminals and creating terrorists. And by actually paying people to say that so and so is a criminal or working for Al Qaeda or whatever.
Well, it's a justification of the Bush regime's war on the world without borders, without times. They said this is going to go on for a generation. So they swept all these people up, and they said, now we have the worst of the worst in Guantanamo. Well, that didn't turn out to be true at all. There's maybe 30 that they're holding now that they intend to try, who, they may or may not have some actual case against them. It's hard to say. Some they certainly do, and they've started pursuing them. They've gotten several people to take a deal and plead guilty, which is really a complete disaster. This young man, Omar Khadr, that was 16 when he was swept up in Afghanistan, spent 10 years in Guantanamo. He finally took a deal because he thought he was never going to get out. He's still in prison in Canada. And, he was a child. Even if he was a soldier in his own country, he was a child, and he never should have been in Guantanamo. But then they've created this situation, which is a huge embarrassment to the U.S., so they just can't give up on it. And that's why it's still open.
Can we talk a little bit about 9/11? Because so many things, 9/11 is sort of the catalyst.
Well, it was used as a justification for the Patriot Act and severe repression and for rounding people up. That, I think that's the connection. And so it's important to understand that the U.S. went and did this around the world the same way they did it in New York. They did it around the world. They created black sites. They escalated the use of something called extraordinary rendition, which in fact was started under Clinton. There was the use of it under Clinton, and you can read about that in Jeremy Scahill's book Dirty Wars, right, and in other places as well. So then there was Bagram. There were thousands and thousands of prisoners held in Afghanistan, in Iraq, tens of thousands of people imprisoned by the U.S. around the world, and in some cases secretly in black sites that we still know some locations of, but others we don't. It's really concerning. And now there's a whole regime in place of torture where they say we don't torture, but holding people indefinitely and certainly force-feeding them is torture.
Amongst other forms of torture, like waterboarding and, I hate to even think of some of the forms of torture that, that maybe perhaps not in Guantanamo, but overseas, the people that they hold, are subjected to. I mean, watching, the war that is still going on, and a lot of the innocent people over there that are being killed and watching their family members being killed, I would say that's pretty much torture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so here, I was just doing another interview, and the woman was asking me, well, what do you think that the administration is going to do? About 5 weeks ago, Obama said that he still wants to close Guantanamo. And so he's lifted the ban on allowing prisoners from Yemen to leave, but nothing has happened yet. And this is, on Friday, it will be 150 days of the prisoners' hunger strike.
So what's the point of having a president? He seems to be like he has no pull. If he's
he has pull when he wants to. He has pull when he wants to use targeted killing and drones anywhere in the world. He says he does not need the approval of Congress. It's just up to him. So, he has plenty of power, obviously.
Because
This is the guy who's presiding over, spying over the whole world.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, the point of having a president is to speak for and to sort of epitomize the interests of those who rule this country. As you said, it's capitalism on steroids. It's capitalism, imperialism. It's actually an empire. And in order to enforce their economic domination of the rest of the world, they have this huge military. And they are sharpening it up, according to people that are in the Obama administration, to be able to project their power anywhere in the world very quickly.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that the system is not for the people. It's obvious that the system is not on the side of the average person, and that money pretty much has seduced and taken over our government. I mean, that is not, there's no doubt about that. And so if people really don't start stepping up, I mean, Guantanamo, right, and the stop and frisk that people or events like the Occupy movement put on, it's all the same thing. It's as if the whole country or world is turned into this huge meat grinder that it's just it's all about profit. And the more vulnerable, poor that you are, I mean, you're just going to get sucked into this meat grinder, and that's the end of you. I mean, it's that simple. Instead of turning the system around and like making it for the people, and saving things like the environment also, it's it just seems like it just keeps gaining more and more momentum and sucking more and more people into it.
I think you're describing the system really well. It is not in the interest of the great majority of people in this country or the world to have this capitalist, imperialist system grinding on. And not only, it's not even a matter that there's very rich people at the top, actually. There are very rich people in this country who aren't part of the ruling class and are not commanding the military and all of these forces. The problem is that there's a class at the top that has shaped all of this to serve its own interests, which is the continued and increasing exploitation of the whole world. And, that it doesn't have to be this way. It's the way it's developed, but there's nothing innate in human nature that says the world should be divided up with a very tiny ruling class, and then everyone else more or less should be suffering for them. And there are people working on doing something about that.
And why do you think that so much of the public just doesn't seem to be quite aware, or I don't understand why people are just not really rioting in the streets. I mean, I really don't get it. Because I think it was just Egypt or something that is giving. I'm sorry. I just the
17 million people were in the streets in Egypt over the weekend, and they're still out in the streets.
Right, and they're giving the person in charge like he's literally got until whatever it is, 24 hours to vacate the premises, or that's it. I'm just like, okay, well, why the heck are we not doing that here? I just don't. I mean, are Americans really like that too much into I don't know, drinking soda or watching Dancing with the Stars, or what is it about this country?
I think, well, that's a whole discussion, isn't it? There's a whole bunch of things going on. One, this is the center of imperialism, and this is where the whole machine emanates from, including the propaganda machine that keeps people's attention focused on the Kardashians, the latest iPhone, all these things you're talking about, and diverts their attention. And people are not mostly starving in the streets in this country the way they are in Egypt right now. People are literally out of food and out of electricity.
So that's what's pretty...
It's a different situation. But then there's also the fact that there is a big, fat middle class in this country, fat in the sense of having been enriched to a certain extent off of the fact that this government is a predator on the rest of the world, and there are some spoils. So what would you say? Maybe 30% of people in this country, are very conservative and attracted to the Republican Party and believe that, America is better than every other place.
See,
I don't know the percentage, but it's a significant number of people, and that's a problem for us. And then the rest of the people who, would probably go along with a different system are not seeing any alternative, and that's our responsibility.
That's sort of the reason, it's funny, like I've never been a political person. I mean, I'm not,
I know, I remember when I met you, you were just starting to come out.
Like
and you were like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I think it's the right thing to do.
But
that was good.
The thing that's so sort of, it's, I was going to say it's funny, but I've known all my life, and I've been trying to speak out about oppression and, not being able to speak the truth, literally since I was fairly young. And I never went in a direction of, because for me, it wasn't a political issue. It was always a health issue. I always pursued health and fitness, physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever you want to call it, because, it was so clear that we were not being raised to be really fit. We were not being raised to be our, as full as we could be. We are, it was obvious that I and a lot of people that I grew up with in my neighborhood, like when I grew up, I know one guy that lived down the block that actually he went to Harvard, and he was a writer. He ended up writing for HBO, and he was a writer for the Simpsons, the TV show The Simpsons. He's like the only person that, you could say kind of like made it. And I always knew in my gut that, listening to your body, speaking what you want to say, saying what you want to say, expressing yourself and being your true self is why you're here on this earth. And everybody else was always, just get a job, like you're supposed, like it's the people have normalized living and just having a job and paying your bills. Like that's the way you're supposed to live, instead of, we're entitled to so much more than that. Like people don't know their rights. It really, it gets me so angry that people have children and we're not being taught what our rights are, and we're not being made to know that we're capable of so much more. If I could just read to you this Mark Twain, I read it sort of earlier, but I wanted to read it to you. I saw this really good Mark Twain quote, which reads, "In religion and politics, people's beliefs and convictions are in almost every case arrived at secondhand and without examination, from authorities who have not themselves examined the questions at issue, but have taken them at secondhand by other non-examiners whose opinions about them are not worth a brass farthing. And I really like that quote because my whole life I've always been, being a health and fitness person, it's always about listening to your body, developing a relationship, listening to your gut, like that's where the wealth is. And so this quote really kind of shows that, right, all we do is listen to some so-called authority who supposedly examined or not, these issues, when they who is listening to some other authority who supposedly is supposed to be examining, when nobody's really looking into this stuff. And even which brings me back to this whole thing about Guantanamo and holding these people without due process. Because this quote that's what it's showing. It's showing that there's no due process. No so-called authority is giving anything the due process that it requires before passing it on to somebody else. And it's just this passing on of a lack of due process. And nobody's giving anything its due process before giving it the seal of approval. And that really bothers me. So that, like, it's all about, the people really need to wake up and be their own authority. And stop thinking that just because someone has some label as president or as, even doctor, or, that people really need to listen and develop their own critical thinking and their own, judgments, and stop just giving their power over to somebody just because they have some label, because those people are not, they're just going to use that against us.
Well, but if you have critical thinking, then you're able to determine whether the people who have power and authority deserve it or not. They might.
Exactly.
Somebody might be an authority and really carry it out with a lot of integrity and actually know what they're doing, and that would be a very good thing. But you're right, if people are not taught to think critically, then you don't know where to go with that.
Right. Like, we can't just take for granted that because someone has some label or they're wearing, a lab coat with a stethoscope around your neck, or, a uniform with stripes and badges all over it. It's amazing how people really get taken in by images, and rather than really putting things to the test or putting people to the test. And now that we're seeing that, right, the powers that be really are not looking out for the people, and now some people are starting to wake up and trying to bring that to the rest of the masses. But unless they're directly affected in a negative way, then, unfortunately, I don't know, why isn't it enough to see that because it's happening to other people? That should be enough to wake people up. It shouldn't need to happen to someone directly. Why wait for it to happen to you? It's going to be a little bit late by the, if you wait for it to hit you directly.
Yeah. Well, as you said, people in the rest of the world are seeing that, and there was a time in this country, even just going back to the 60s, when people, and it mainly came from black people first, from youth, women, other sections of the people kind of waking up and saying, hey, this is really unjust, and we can and must do something about it. That there was a transformation, and that movement came together. Now, we weren't able to really have a revolution out of it, but it was very, very significant that this country was so deeply challenged, and the people that run this country were so deeply challenged by it. So it's possible. We're not doomed to America's going to be the way it is forever, and there's no way out of it. On the other hand, it can get too late, and in this case, too late even involves the existence of the global environment.
Right. So
this rapacious capitalism, imperialism, could destroy the planet. Or nuclear war could destroy the planet.
When you said before about everybody, holding on to that idea that, this is like the greatest country in the world, it always brings me back to the idea that, everything gets worn out. You can't just say that, but then in reality, it's not really true. It's up to the people to keep it that way. Just like you have to upkeep, your marriage even, falls apart after a while if you don't put the effort into it. So, we have to keep this country great. It takes effort to keep the country great. You can't just keep saying it's great, but do nothing to keep it that way. And then
great. What do people mean by great?
Yeah,
I've never felt this country was great ever.
Right.
This is the biggest predator nation in the history of the world, the only country to have ever used a nuclear weapon. It'll never be great. It can't overcome that. It was built on slavery and genocide. That doesn't mean that there aren't great aspects of the culture, the society, that could turn into something better, but it would take a revolution to do that.
And you have
this society, the way it's set up now, it's not ever going to be great.
You have to be critical. Criticism, you have to criticize things in order to know and see the shortcomings so that you can improve. If we're never allowed to criticize the government or our country, give me a break. They put your heart through a stress test to see where its weaknesses are and to see, how strong it is. We have to put the government, we have to, put the president to the test in order to see where the shortcomings are. That's how you get to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, by calling, Snowden and, Bradley Manning, who I only got to go to that trial for about an hour last Thursday when they
we're going back Monday.
Calling
on everybody to come Monday because that's the day the defense starts. Everyone that can get there to Fort Meade, Monday, July 8th. Call World Can't Wait.
Okay.
I'm going to give the number, 866-973-4463. That's 866-973-4463. We are organizing housing and carpools for people to get there.
Amazing. So, this is it, folks. This is it. This is your life. This is the future of your children and your grandchildren. We have to take our country back, and it's not going to do it by itself. So,
yes, except that it's not our country.
Right.
And they let us know that all the time. We don't have any say about it.
Yep.
Whatsoever.
I hear you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Debra, and we'll be in touch, okay?
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. So, thank you, Debra Sweet of worldcan'twait.net, I believe. And after our upcoming break, we will have Velcrow Ripper, who put out a documentary called Occupy Love that is around the country. It's been out actually for over a month, and we'll have him on to tell us how that has been going, because we could definitely use some occupying some love.
Your life.
Okay, we're back from break, and we have on the line Velcrow Ripper, who put together the documentary called Occupy Love, which we're definitely in much need of these, like for decades, we're in a shortage of love. And the movie came out. It's been over a month now. Is that right, Velcrow?
Well, it's actually been doing film festivals since last October, and then it had its community screening launch in April, where it was showed all over the world, including places like Brazil, where there was like 1,500 people at outdoor screenings at Occupy Rio and Porto Alegre, and it showed all across Turkey, Bulgaria, all over the world. It's been really exciting. And then we had our theatrical launch in May in New York City.
And that's where I went.
Yeah, which was really fun. So that's why you think it's just been a month, but it's been coming out all over, and now it's also screening online, and it's just been taken off like wildfire. So it's really exciting.
Well, congratulations. We definitely need to bring like more attention to that. Like I've been I'm a health and fitness person. It's that's part of loving yourself. I mean, you got to give in this natural environment that we're pretty much just using up and not replenishing. I try to bring awareness to the body and health, not just physically, but emotionally. I mean, love is part of health. I mean, love is going to save us. With capitalism, crony capitalism, it's all about just taking and taking and taking from the environment and from ourselves, and it leaves nobody can afford to really love anybody anymore. Unfortunately, it's like money issues just suck all the lubrication out of a lot of relationships. So tell people how it started, because it didn't start out as Occupy Love, did it?
Yeah, right. Well, the film is actually part of a trilogy that I've been shooting over actually since from the year 2000 to 2012. And the idea was kind of to take the pulse of the planet during this epic time in human history that I sensed was coming. And so it began with Scared Sacred, which was a journey to the ground zeros of the world, looking for hope in the face of crisis. And one of the things that I'm good at, and the National Post said to me, once described me as somebody who could find the silver lining in a mushroom cloud. And talking about that particular film, because I went to places like Hiroshima, I was in New York City during 9/11, Cambodia, Afghanistan. But in all those places, I found survivors who got through these great crises with their spirit not only intact, but even transformed. And it's really, gave me a kind of industrial strength spirituality making that film. And I learned there were two things that really got people through. One was having a sense of meaning. Like they needed to have meaning in their lives to survive these incredible crises, which are beyond anything I could even imagine. And the second was taking action. A lot of people found it really healing to try to take action, to try to change the world so that what happened to them might not happen to others. For example, a Hiroshima survivor was, teaching people about the horrors of nuclear war, and so that was so those two things, meaning and action together, and that's what led to the next film in the trilogy, which is Fierce Light, when spirit meets action. And in that film, I put together spirituality and activism in the vein of Gandhi or Martin Luther King, and again, traveled all over the world looking for those kinds of stories. And that's the second in the trilogy. And that, in turn, and when I was shooting that, I started to get the sense that things were shifting in the movements, that there was something bubbling up, like that the people around the world were starting to wake up. And then I set out to make the third in the trilogy, initially called Evolve Love. And I actually threw out the word spirituality altogether and replaced it with the word love. Mm-hmm. And I realized that at the heart of all the spiritual teachings is really this idea of love. You can call it different things. It's interconnection, it's interdependence, it's connection, it's community, it's recognizing that we all come from the same place. And we all share the same universe, the same planet, and and that there is no separation. So that's really the heart of most spiritual traditions.
So if do you think most people know what love is?
No, I don't think so. I think our culture has turned love into a commodity, like it does with everything, and it's the corporatization of the world that's happening right now. The hallmark version of love is not love. Now, the love I'm talking about is a fierce love. It's a love that's not pink and frilly and fluffy and something that you can buy at at a mall. It's real love, and it's a love that wants truth and justice. It's a love that wants compassion.
Love can be pretty ugly, don't you think? Like real love, to me, real love embraces ugliness and darkness.
The shadow. It's not afraid of the shadow. It's not afraid to look at anything. You have to look at the full picture.
That's exactly it. Like that's I think the reason, I was always trying to, I think, repair my body from the sort of lack of a loving environment, growing up. And, fitness and health was always such a big part of that. I think in an attempt to kind of replace what wasn't there. And, just learning what love is, because so many people call things love, which is really kind of dysfunctional.
Or even greed, or attachment or ownership, We confuse love with ownership, which is just a tragedy, We should never want to own anybody or any, we should want the best for somebody, and they're only going to flourish in a state of freedom. And, we've confused love with jealousy and things like that, attachment. But real love, is about stepping beyond the othering and stepping beyond control and power, and having this healthy power relationship. In fact, a lot of what Occupy Love is about, and I believe is at the core of what made the Occupy movement so unique, is of changing our relationships to power. Because in our society, we live in a dominator culture. Western civilization has become a dominator culture, top-down, power-over model, very patriarchal. And real love is about sharing power, and it's about it's a horizontal kind of relationship to power, where we want the best for each other. One of the lines in the film is, to an economist, more for you means less for me, but to a lover, more for you means more for me too.
Amen, Velcrow. I'm so glad that I was able. I'm sorry that we kind of had you on at the last minute. We'll send you a copy of the podcast, and I hope you can stay on longer. I mean, I'm not ready to let you go, anytime soon. I mean, you can stay on until 8:00 if you like, because this is a really great subject. Again, like for me, I really believe that it's true that this crony capitalist, capitalism on steroids system that we live in has kept people so out of breath that they can't keep up. And of course, one of the things of many things that gets left to go by the wayside is health, relationships, love, the environment, all of these things that are being expendable in order to keep this fake monetary system going. And I really try to bring the attention to, in relationships, we need to keep cultivating. Like, love is part of nature. It's like flowers, it's like vegetables. It's something that needs to be, you have to cultivate it. It can't, we live in this system where it's just constantly about taking. Like, we expect things to be there without cultivating it. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, crazy is exactly it. We live what we have is a cultural pathology. And it's not, and it's kind of running out of control. Now, the good thing about this is that it's collapsing, and as the crisis intensifies, then possibility emerges. And that's what we're seeing in countries right now that are really going off, like Turkey or Brazil or Egypt, where they're in this state of crisis now, and there's a need for this change. And we're seeing people rising up from the bottom up, and these movements, which are just so fascinating to see happen, are natural. They are organic. They don't actually. They're just happening, and they're unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen next in the world, but we are seeing increasingly that there's a connection, a global connection between people, which I think is a kind of love. When we see the solidarity, incredible solidarity, we're all there. We're all there with the people in Turkey. We're all we're all there, supporting each other, and we're doing that through social media and Twitter, and so there's this kind of great love story, which is what the film talks about, this movement of movements, and that's where the hope is. It's right now probably the minority, but we are all waking up to this similar understanding, and it's that this current neoliberal capitalist system is a parasite that's destroying the host, and it can't be sustained. It's destroying the environment, and it's destroying the economies, local economies. It's just trying to suck the lifeblood out of everything, and it's been pretty successful in the past, drugging us with television and bread and circuses, basically. But that's not working so much anymore. So that's why my question was, how could the crisis on the planet become a love story? How could it lead to that? And I've seen that in these, in the initial film in the trilogy, in the ground zeros of the world. I've seen how crisis can lead people to suddenly wake up and go, wow, life is precious. How can I restore the preciousness of life? And that's where the hope lies.
That's like as you were speaking, it made me think about because to me, crisis and so-called crisis, it really can be a blessing, because it helps people to really get clarity and listen to the body. Because one thing that I really feel has happened, and what keeps people from taking action, is that so many people live in their heads and not in their bodies. I think we maybe talked a little bit about that when I helped the We Are Change Connecticut interview you outside of theater in New York, and I think actually you said it, which I was like, oh my God, yay, somebody that thinks and talks like I do, because I'm always talking about the mind-body connection. I've been a big, I try to be like this big advocate of, yoga and meditation in order to help people to see that, their mind-body connection has been, people don't realize they've literally been decapitated from their bodies, and they have this relationship with their own bodies, the way the system relates to the environment. It's all about just kind of taking, using your body, taking from it, you like using it like it's some unlimited checking account that you never have to make a deposit in, but is always going to be there for you to make withdrawals from, which is completely wrong. You have to put back, you have to replenish, you have to, again, cultivate that relationship and learn to relate to other people in more respectable ways, and not always be coming into relationships looking for what you can just get from people, but rather what you give, because when you give, you get. I mean, that's the way that it's supposed to work, but according to capitalism, or the psychotic capitalism system that we live in, it's all about, me and screw you, which is going to screw all of us in the end. So, go ahead. I don't know where I sort of, cut.
Yeah, well, I think you've tapped into a few key things there, and it is definitely the we're talking about the gift economy and moving towards a gift economy and moving into a place where we are givers and not just takers, and the body itself, I think, is also it's all the macro and the micro, they reflect each other. And I was thinking about the idea of crisis, and that if we don't, it works on the body level too. If we don't listen to the signs of our body, it's going to keep giving us more greater and greater crisis. It might take the end of a relationship before we wake up to something that's going wrong. It might take cancer before we wake up to, wow, what are we doing to our bodies? So we need to learn to really listen to these warning signs. Mother Earth right now is giving us huge warning signs, and are we listening? We have to listen. The tremors. How could we ignore the collapse of the stock market and think that it's not going to just happen again? It's we got to start paying attention to these and responding to these wake up calls.
If I could just share with you, I don't know if you ever saw the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movie.
No, I haven't.
There's a really good line at the end of the movie. I mean, it's sort of kind of has a bit of a morbid, because it's actually the killer who's saying it to the journalist. And he talks about the victims that he was holding in the basement of the house, and how they always believe that he's going to show them mercy and let them go. And he talks about when they get it, that he's not going to let them go, and that, they've actually met their demise. And he calls it like this precious moment when they get it, because it doesn't fit into their scheme of things. And I think of that line sometimes with what is going on in the world, with all of the, like where we're really heading if we don't do something, and how, it doesn't fit into people's scheme of things, how, ugly things can really get if people do not wake up.
Well, we're starting to see that firsthand. We're seeing crazy wildfires and crazy floods, and we used to hurricanes in New York. We never had those before. We used to think it was always somebody else, especially in the so-called first world. We used to always think these are things that are going to happen somewhere else, and we could kind of comfortably continue in our lives. But we have towns going bankrupt in the U.S. right now, and we have it's coming home. And there's a line that says in the United States there are no poor people, only temporarily embarrassed millionaires. And there's this kind of myth that people have that they're all oh yeah, well, I'm going to be that Donald Trump. I'm just going to that's going to be me. So I'm going to put up with all these lies and manipulation and this sucking dry of the wealth as it gets concentrated into this tiny pockets of the tiny minority of people. And so there's that kind of myth, but I think that's all starting to crack and puncture right now, and it's getting harder and harder to maintain that illusion.
Right. And in the places that you've gone, you mentioned going to the ground zeros of the world. Do you mind sharing any particular story of inspiration from any particular people that you've met in those places?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there was one young man I met named Aki Ra in Cambodia, and when he was a child, he grew up during the genocide there, the time of Pol Pot. And he was forced to, like so many young people, he was forced to be a child soldier, and so he as a child was laid down landmines all across Cambodia, and killed many people, and when the war ended and he got out of that situation, he just wanted to somehow heal, and he decided to take it upon himself to start taking landmines out all across that country. So he just does it on his own with a stick. and he walks through the jungle, and he does like 100 landmines a day, just tapping along. He knows how to do it. I filmed him doing this. He just taps along, finds a landmine, and then takes it apart and defuses it. And this is for a actual like a UN team to go in and defuse a landmine, it takes weeks, and they do like maybe 5 a day, and it costs thousands and thousands of dollars. And here's a guy in his bare feet just walking through the countryside, just doing it.
And,
it's an amazing story.
How old is he?
Well, now he's probably 50. He's been doing it for 20 years, 25, 30 years. Yeah. And, he also started a landmine museum, and he takes in orphans who have been, injured, because it's a huge problem in Cambodia. There's thousands and thousands of landmines. So he takes in orphans and people who have been injured by landmines. So here's a guy who was responsible for causing this great pain, and now he works, dedicates his life to healing that country.
Thank God for that. I was thinking, recently about, like, I feel like that, that's what people need to do. Like, they need to get in touch with sort of more of a instinctual, wild limbic system, or who they were when they were, younger. I mean, that youthful rebelliousness, like so many people have just been so, adultrified, to go along with the system. And we really need to get back in touch with that rebellious sort of teenager in us, that youth person, hopefully, that's still in people, to to challenge this system.
Mm-hmm. I think that rebellion is a good phase, but we need to go beyond rebellion, and we need to go to to actual revolution, so that we're not just rebelling against, we're not just opposing, we're also proposing. And I think that's where the evolution of the movements are now. It's like we're saying, okay, we can't just be looking at how we tear it down. What are we going to put up in its place? And that's where grounding ourselves in love and compassion, and really looking at how do we actually fix this mess is really important. And I see that evolving, and that's actually what our next film is going to be about, solutionaries. And I think that's really exciting. So we need both. I think we need three things. Joanna Macy says this so beautifully, a great teacher. She says we need to both say no to the destruction of the planet and the economy. We need to say no. We need to rebel. We need to stop it. We need to also propose. We need to create the alternatives in various, and we need to reinvent society at every level: justice, economy, ecology. You could go through every system and say, it's screwed up. How do we fix it? Restorative justice, permaculture, real health care, community level, collective level, cooperative level ways of dealing with our economy. And then the third form of transformation is a shift in consciousness. And until that happens, until we actually have a paradigm shift, nothing's really going to change. We can change a few laws here or change a few structures there, but if our very culture is in this cultural pathology, ultimately nothing's going to change. And I think activists often underestimate the importance of that aspect. They often just want to go on and they just want to fight the system, but they're not necessarily interested in also doing the work on the mind, body, spirit, heart level. And I think that we need to really take that seriously. And that to me was something that I was really excited about when Occupy emerged, because for the first time I felt like, hey, there's room here. There's an acceptance here. There's actually meditation happening here. There's yoga happening here amongst all the political stuff that's going on. And I'd never really seen that before in the activist scenario. And I think we need to continue that.
Yeah, it actually, when I saw people sitting in a circle and actually meditating in Zuccotti Park, boy, I never thought I would live to see that day. Because I actually myself learned back in, I think it was like 1983, meditation. I mean, I was fairly young. I mean, I was still like a teenager at this time, and just again because of issues and personal things that you're going through in your life, I was seeking a different way than what we've been currently living in back then, and have been, and it wasn't really that popular at that time. I mean, I'm sure in some places it was, but here in the United States, sometimes like I get a little annoyed too, because even things like yoga have gotten so kind of commercialized, and people just turn that into another capitalistic venture rather than
or simply an exercise class, and it's not. It's more than that.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't know if I'm maybe just too much of an idealist, but I really do believe that true, yoga or meditation practice really should be just by donation. I don't think anybody, because then it defeats the point because the whole point of yoga is freedom, is to free up space. And if it's just about money and charging people like a lot of money, then it ends up becoming the very thing that we're trying to, that we don't want it to be.
Yeah, that's really important. Everything we do at Fierce Love Films, we do it on the gift economy, and everything's no one turned away for lack of funds. Whatever we do, and I really do think that's really important, because it has a different energy behind it. We're not. I think that people do need to make a living. They do need to survive. But I think people will be generous if you put it to them that way.
Right.
And that's kind of trying to work from the change our whole way of thinking to coming from this gift economy, this spirit of mutual aid, right? Which is really the spirit between which I think really got popularized with Occupy Sandy, where we started hearing that phrase a lot, mutual aid.
Right.
If we could move to a society of mutually enhancing relationships, what if everything we did was about trying to make raise each other up, support each other? We wouldn't have this sense of scarcity and fear, because we really can support each other in community. There really is enough to go around if we change the way we do it.
Well, I'm really glad that I'm having you on right now, because you're just saying everything that I'm just always saying. And I mean, like, there's a lot of people that are really like entrepreneurs. Like I've actually gone to a few Bitcoin meetings here in New York, and I, like the part of me that agrees with it, because it takes the power away from the powers that be, and it makes just sort of more fair trade among people, cutting out the middleman more possible. But then again, at the same time, a lot of the people that go to the Bitcoin meetings, they like, I hear them talking so much about entrepreneur and, starting businesses. And I just keep thinking like, oh, we need more, right, like love and giving, and we, and to get away from, there's a lot of people that go to Bitcoin because they want to get rich. And like, oh, like if you want to get rich, go out and help somebody, go out and right, like volunteer at Occupy Sandy, or go to Haiti and help, there you'll be rich. I mean, it's just this idea that people have about now Bitcoin is going to make them rich. I mean, I don't, that doesn't align inside of me, because my thinking is more along the lines of, right, helping the people in Oklahoma who just got their houses destroyed in a tornado, as more. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's the female nurturing part of myself, that I can't help but. I mean, I never had any children because I knew that there's so many people that that need help. I mean, myself included, you know. So yeah, we need to just help each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a challenge for us making films because it's so darn expensive making them. So
Yeah.
we, that there is this problem of like, I do things like use credit cards, and here I am like somebody who's like making a film that's about this economic system that sucks, getting sucked into debt, So I don't think we're quite there yet in how we can how we can have this gift economy working. Especially when we try to do these kind of expensive things. I'd love to find a way. We did do crowdfunding, which I think is a wonderful way to go. And crowdfunding is really about people, support projects that they want to see happen, not because they're expecting a return, but because they want to see it happen. Because they think it needs to be there in the world, and that kind of model. And I find that I often kick into and the idea with crowdfunding is, you don't have to put in that much, just a few bucks. But if enough people do, then it makes something possible.
Crowdfunding. What is crowdfunding?
Well, it's Indiegogo or Kickstarter. You've probably seen these campaigns go around Facebook. That's crowdfunding. So it's like, it can be for any project.
Wow.
Yeah, and you just have a network of people, and the idea is that the community, it gets rid of the gatekeepers, so that you're not going to somebody from the top to say, hey, I need to do this project, please, 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 help fund it, and then they say no, and then it doesn't happen. Like for a film, you go to a television broadcaster, and then the television broadcaster says, okay, I'll give you money, but you can't say this and you can't say that. This happens all the time, right?
Why don't politicians then go to Indiegogo and crowdfunding, so that they can then be free of the
corporations?
Yeah.
Well, actually, Obama did do that, and that was his radical thing in the beginning. It's too bad he let us down so much, but he was somebody who actually used social media and those kind of micro donations to cut through. He didn't have that kind of corporate support. Unfortunately, he's totally just bought into the whole neoliberal system, and it's a tragedy, really. But he was somebody that did use that.
Well, that's hopeful that there are. So where does the money come from on these?
No, it comes from you and me, anybody. Okay. Yeah.
So, that's exactly right. Like we have to, it's almost like we're like reparenting one another, and like it's not too late to be what you always wanted to be when you grow up, because of course the system doesn't really want people to be what they want to be when they grow up. The system wants you to be what they want you to be, and here is actually an opportunity to kind of maybe start over. I know it's not easy for a lot of people, and maybe people won't do it, but the people that give can donate so that the people that actually have it, like yourself, there's still hope for them to do. On Facebook, someone had posted, actually I think it was Bill Still's official Facebook page. He had a video of someone who went through college, went to graduate school, did the whole what parents and the system want you to be, all the while always wanting to do music, and disillusioned by what the system, not being happy going the route that he was sort of guided to take. So, he's looking to get I think $30,000, to do what he always wanted to do, which is music. And that's, it's definitely something to look into. And it's not too late to still do what you always wanted to do.
Yeah, it can be scary to follow your dreams and follow your heart. But, one of the things people always ask me, how can I be part of this movement? How can I be part of the change that needs to happen in the world? And my response is usually the best way for you to really be of service to this planet or to your community is to really unwrap your gifts. Like, find out what it is that makes your heart sing. What is it that you really can offer to the world, and just do that. And that isn't necessarily going to be the thing that's going to give you security. It's not necessarily going to give you like financial reward, but it's going to give you meaning in your life, and you line that up with being of service. Your gifts and being of service, bring those two things together, and you're going to have the deepest source of meaning possible to you in your life. It's going to be deeply satisfying. You don't want to wake up, at the end of your life and say, "What did I do? Did I work? What is it? Work, buy, consume, die." That's the model, that we're being fed, and it doesn't bring us happiness. We're not a happy society. So we need meaning to be happy. We need meaning, and that really comes from really listening to your heart. And you can check into it. You can check in and say you know when you're following your heart and when you're not. And it's a little scary, because if you really learn to listen to your heart is going to take risks. Your heart is, your soul's journey is much more exciting than your brain's journey. The brain is rooted in fear. This is the whole problem with living from the neck up.
Right. What I wanted to just add was that, when you talked about risk, like that's the fuel that, nature actually runs on. I feel that, like taking these chances, being willing to be vulnerable, putting yourself out there is what the universe responds to. Because, the powers that be and all, like they've set this system up where, they kind of benefit at the expense of the rest of us. They don't, it's like they don't want risk. Like they want a sure thing. They want...
Right. Hollywood, for example, is going to keep making more and more Superman movies, and, every comic book character there is, because that's safe, and they can guarantee a certain profit margin.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's all about, money literally has just become so cheap, and everything that it puts out is just so cheap, and GMO, and we're becoming GMO people, which fake people. It's like, for people to be, their authentic self, their real self, like you're talking about, it's really scary to follow your heart. I mean, that's I don't know how else to put it. So I just, kind of getting away from being your Monsanto GMO self and becoming more of your authentic organic self. Mm-hmm. So, we have to do it ourselves. I mean, we can't, just be pointing the finger at the banks or the big corporations. The spiritual aspect of it is to see how do we do it? How are we perpetuating it? How are we not living authentically? Mm-hmm. And, it's scary, but I think if we do at least a little bit, like make a point a little bit every day of just kind of telling the truth, regardless of how someone responds to it, and then see what happens, Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be a big thing, and it doesn't, and also it's not necessarily about, you don't need anything to change this. In Bolivia, they which is in Occupy Love, that we go to Bolivia, where they talk about this idea of living well, and they say in the West we're obsessed with living better. We want more, we want bigger, we want faster, we want more. But what we're not focused on is actually our quality of life, the living well, and oftentimes less stuff actually leads to greater happiness. Having your house filled with consumer crap is not going to make you happy. Just slowing down, meeting your neighbors, gardening, these basic things. You can simply just shift gears and change your quality of life. Fast food was basically failed miserably in Bolivia, and there's no more McDonald's because people are like, fast food? Come on, food is about slowing down, gathering, taking the time, cooking, and that's these simple aspects of life, shifting our priorities And it's not about necessarily having more money to be able to do this. It's not it's really just about more of this change in priorities and a different understanding of what quality of life is about.
That's that brings me to the last point that I'll make, because we're running out of time, is that what I feel like has happened, because we rely on money so much, and we're so conditioned to see it as having this value that it doesn't really have. And the process, we've lost touch with our inner currency. Right, like the currency that you were just talking about. Ourselves and exchanging with one another and finding our own gifts, like all of those things is a currency. Like that's about, a true natural currency that we don't even recognize anymore.
Yeah, definitely. We have that. And we can access all of this. It's not that hard. And as the crisis intensifies, these values of, especially of community, I can't come back to the importance of community more enough. These are things that we've lost in our capitalist society. We've become more and more atomized, isolated, fearful of each other. And Margaret Thatcher really, she really brought that home, that there's no community. There's only, your nuclear family. That's what it was about, and that consuming unit. But if there isn't, there probably will be a greater crash to come down the road. We're not going to get through it in our bunkers, as survivalists might want us to believe, with our guns and our cans of beans. That's only going to last us like a month. We're going to get through it like we did in Hurricane Sandy, with Occupy Sandy, by coming together and supporting each other. And that's where the future lies, in returning to community.
Yeah, definitely learning how to live life all over again, almost.
Yeah.
So thank you for being on, and we'll send you a link for the podcast after, and we'll check in with you again in the future to see how everything is going. And I really want to thank you for your work. I think it's great, and everything you're saying is really, really wonderful.
Great. Well, I just want to say to people, come and join us on Facebook. Find Occupy Love. The Facebook group's really exciting these days. We got a lot going on there, and you can go to the website occupylove.org. And there's a button there. We ask people to chip in to watch the film, but if you can't, click on the button that says gift, and you can watch it for free too.
Well, thank you so much, and you're just doing great things.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kat. Good talking to you.
Okay, you too.
Okay, take good care.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Well, that is a relief to hear people saying, because I'm usually the one speaking like him to other people who I'm trying to reach. And where it starts to get really tricky is that until you can acquire some footing for yourself and some, it becomes like a catch-22. Like, you can't wake other people up until you've reached a certain level, but then you can't reach that certain level yourself unless you have people, energetically donating to you. So it becomes this catch-22 that, I've experienced this, people, they don't listen to you unless you have, letters after your name, or have an office and drive a certain kind of car and wear certain kind of clothing. People will continue to see you as, not credible, which the whole point is that, right, because people are looking, they want to take from you rather than give. They don't understand that we have to help one another. It's like people can't get anywhere without your help. So it becomes this catch-22. So that's what I would like to leave people with at the end of these last couple of minutes that we have, is that we have to give. It's not just about taking. And so as long as we sometimes tend to look at people, like they're not credible because they're not at a certain, status level, well, how are they ever going to get to the status level if we don't give them credit, if we don't help them get there? It's all a matter of, we need to give. We need to help lift people up. The people that ride the subway and they come on, there's so many people now when you ride the New York City subway asking for money. I don't necessarily think that just giving people money, just giving anybody money is the answer. I always try to give people food or something on the subway if I can. But if someone is playing playing music or something like that, maybe I will give them $1. But other than that, I'll try to just give people food or something. Anything that I have in my knapsack. But so that's the way I'm going to leave off. And we have to sometimes give and not always be looking to get. And so next week, I will be back 6 o'clock Tuesday. Thank you all for listening. And my YouTube channel is April Waters, Watters.